Nikala, welcome to Uncensored Wisdom. How you doing today?
I'm doing great, and I'm just honored to be here. You all have been putting out great content about entrepreneurs in the city of Houston and elsewhere, so it's a privilege for me to be able to be here with you.
Appreciate that. Okay, so before we get started, let's just dial down into your upbringing, your childhood. What have you always been somebody who was interested in like raising kids? Did you raise kids when you was a kid?
That's a good question. I've never had anyone ask me that. I would say no.
Okay.
That I didn't raise any children because I was the youngest within my family. And because my siblings were so much older than me, I spent a lot of time by myself. So that fed a lot into who I've become as an adult. And spending so much time by myself, it was like I was taking walks in nature. I was going out biking by myself. I was spending a lot of time in the library. And I would challenge myself every school that I went to read every book in the library. So I would just start on one side and just work my way all the way through all of the books. And I usually read at least, one book a day, but sometimes, several books in a day, depending on, the size of the book and the content. And all of that fed a lot into my personality as an adult, and the reason why I would venture to start a school for children around the world.
Right. So you always been a bookworm.
I've always been a bookworm. I've always been, a person who loves the creative arts. I started writing very young. I started creating visual art very young. I was what they call one of the gifted and talented children. So when I was in pre-K, they tested me out and put me into a separate group, from the other children at that time. Group of about 10 children, and I stayed with that same group all the way until high school. So we read different books than the rest of the students at the school. We had different experiences. We didn't have a traditional classroom set up. We had bean bags and things like that in the classrooms, which as an adult looking back on that, I really feel like if they gave more accommodations to all students to be able to be more comfortable within the classroom, have more fun, then they would have better results too. Right. But, in most schools, it's really the children who they say, okay, you're gifted. Then it's like, we're going to give you more attention because you're gifted. And these students who need more attention because they need to catch up on the subjects, we're going to give them less attention.
Right.
Right?
It's a backwards system.
Right, exactly. So, earlier we were talking about, some of the books like Lord of the Flies, Anthem, 1984. We read those when we were like in third grade.
Wow.
In the program that I was in. So I didn't have even a sense of what the other children were learning or what that experience was like for them. Because, as a child, you're thinking like, okay, if this is my experience,
this is everybody's experience.
Right, this is everybody's experience, or it must be at least close to this. And when I got into high school, of course, with me being in that program, I wasn't around a lot of other Black children, at least not when I was in the classroom. But at home, I was not around anyone who wasn't Black.
Right.
Because my family has a community north of Houston that we've actually been in since slavery. So everyone there is related, a few hundred people. And, within that community, you're only around Black people. And, it's like a infusion of Black culture because of it being, so rooted in history, right? So it's like, at school, you're not fitting in because, you're around these children that have a different home experience from you. And then at home, you're not quite fitting in because, you're the smart one. So you're not, wanting to do the same things that, everybody else wants to do or, having the same interest, right? And I think as a child, I did want to fit in more with people in my community.
Right.
And, they were not on that level of, being interested in books. They were like, especially when I was coming into my teenage years, it was like, okay, what party are we going to go to? Are we going to skip school? Are we going to go to the mall? Things like that. So wanting to have more of that experience, I unenrolled myself from gifted and talented classes so that I could be in the regular classes. And I'm like, I'm tired of being separate, from everybody. And I want to be, with my cousins and my, friends from the neighborhood. So unenrolling from those classes, it opened my eyes to what was really happening with the education system. I transferred to Sharpstown when I was in the 10th grade, and there were students who couldn't read in the 10th grade. And I was like, what is this? Like, how is this possible? So coming into that setting, when you ask me, like, did you raise kids as a kid? Like, no, I didn't raise kids, but I became a teacher to the students when I transitioned back to
your peers,
being
basically.
when I came back to regular classes, so to say, I already knew everything. I had learned the things that they were learning in the 10th grade when I was in elementary school. So it wasn't a challenge for me. So my challenge became to help them to be able to understand the material. So every class that I was in, I became more attached to the teacher than, the student so much. And then I would be that person who was, helping the teacher, walking around the class, helping the students solve their algebra problems, helping them, to do their biology homework, helping them get ready for tests, and then
basically
I became
being the teacher.
Right.
Yeah, the teacher's assistant.
Right, teacher's assistant, so to say, and then it was like, well, can you write this essay for me? Can I pay you to write this essay for me? So then that became my little hustle in high school, was like writing essays for other students and, them paying me for that, if they didn't want to get, direct tutoring, from me. And, that was my experience for the rest of school. There was not any new material that was introduced to me in that setting that was like, okay, yes, I'm actively learning something versus just, reviewing, old material. However, like many people, in our community, my home life was not always stable. And with it not being stable, my father having some experience with being in prison and so on, I had to start working very young, living on my own very young, having my own apartment and all of those things. So I didn't end up finishing high school because I was working like 12 to 18 hours a day. And I had to go back and get my GED. Yeah.
Wow. So
So I think that was a great experience for me too, because it helps me to navigate that space with other students who, have personal challenges that keep them from being able to finish school. We actually just graduated 2 students this summer who had a very similar issue, where they had some home life stuff that was preventing them from being able to graduate from high school. And I was able to work with them over the summer, get them through the materials, test them out, get them their diplomas, and get them enrolled into their next program. And for one of them, that was going to culinary school. And for the other one, she's in a program now to be a nursing assistant. And it's life transforming, right? I guess you could say that the big thing for me is to, number one, take my experiences from being in an accelerated program and having that extra attention and giving that extra attention to every student, regardless of whether, the standardized Eurocentric system considers them to be gifted or not. You might have a student who, they can't take a test and say that they're going to be gifted in specifically math or specifically English language arts, but they might be a very gifted artist or a very gifted lyricist. They may be very gifted orally, for example, and that's still a gift. So they shouldn't receive less attention because, they're not able to solve quadratic equations in the 5th grade,
Right, for sure.
So that's part of it. And then the other part of it is, being able to give people the support that they need to transform lives in the way that they would like to be transformed, that they would like to evolve, right? So, just for example, with, the student who's transitioning to nursing school, not nursing school yet, first she's becoming a CNA, and then she's going to be going to nursing school, from there, like after she starts working. She is 22 years old, right? She's actually the aunt of some of our younger students, that are in elementary school.
Got you.
And, she was just staying with them, and like helping them with their homeschooling, taking care of them. But she was not able to start a job of her own or move forward in her own life because she had come to the United States from Nigeria. English is not her first language. She was struggling with trying to take the GED test over and over and over. And every time she was getting like 2 points, too little,
right.
Where she wasn't able to quite pass it. And nobody had that patience with her to be like, okay, I'm going to hold your hand and I'm going to meet with you one-on-one. I'm going to walk you through this path that you need to get through to be able to get to that next step in your life. But we were able to do that with her at Whole Living Academy. So she was able to go ahead and finish this goal that she had been working on for 5 years unsuccessfully on her own, right? And now, within 6 months, she was able to go ahead and accomplish that goal and already be in her next thing because we also provided the counseling for her to be able to make that transition instead of just like, okay, yeah, now go figure it out. Good luck,
Right. Whoa.
So.
Okay.
Yeah.
So y'all doing counseling. Y'all got a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah. I mean, it's really about what each student needs, right? And that's why, we work in small groups. We're student-centered, so whatever each student needs, whatever each family needs, then that's what we're doing. So, just for example, I had a parent who, I'll give you an example of a couple of the calls that I've gotten within the past few days. So I had a parent who I spoke with yesterday, and she was enrolling her 3 children, by referral from another family who had a great experience, right? This particular family, one of her students had some, congenital health issues that resulted in learning differences. Another one of her children is on the same level with that older child, but is younger. So they like to be paired together, but one is 12 and one is 15. They work really well together. But within a conventional school setting,
that can't happen.
That can't happen, right? And then the youngest student, he is, around 10 and he had a speech delay. So he can learn just fine, but he's not, starting from where his, age is within like the conventional system.
Right.
Right? So, if he was put into a regular classroom for his age, they'd say, oh, you're behind. But he's not behind. He's a miracle story. He wasn't speaking until he was close to 5 years old. And now he's, learning at a great pace. So he's not actually behind. He's ahead, but it depends on whose standards that you're judging it by. So within our program, we're able to actually meet each one of those students' needs. We have the younger student to go into a classroom where he's working with students who are on the same level, regardless of their age. And then the 2 older students, they're going to be paired together, working on their level with other students, just based on their skill level and not based on their age. And then each one of the students is receiving personalized attention to address, whatever problems may come up. And we keep the class size, it's like between 10 and 15 students so that we're able to do that successfully.
Got you. So when did you personally start identifying that everybody is an individual and they have to be taught separately from each individual person? When did this come about? Was it in school when you was working with your peers, or did it happen somewhere else along the line?
I would say that it started, back in high school when I started really heavily working with my peers. And I would say that it became more apparent when I had my first child. So, when I had my son, who is now about to be 20 years old, I didn't know anything about homeschooling or cultural education. It was just like, okay, put your child in school. If they're gifted, then they're going to put them in a gifted class, and then
Right, you
he'll
thinking
get the
about
same
your experience.
attention.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. We're always projecting our experiences onto other people, right? So, I enrolled him in public school. They put him in gifted class. I'm like, all right, cool. No problem. Man, they started treating my son all kinds of crazy. Him being a black boy, them being racist. He was having all these issues that I hadn't, even thought about, and then there were certain areas where he was stronger and certain areas where he was not as strong. And, for them, it was like they talked to him like something was wrong with him if, he wasn't the same across the board, so to say. Like, if you're having a little bit of trouble with reading, but you're great in math, then it's like, something's wrong with you because you're not reading on the level that we need you to be reading on right now. Instead of saying like, oh, we just need to give you a little bit of extra attention in reading, but at the same time, because you're advanced in math, continue you on that path of advancing from where you are in math, right? And that's not the way that the school system works. So I kept running into challenges with, even talking to his teachers and trying to come to some type of, understanding or develop a plan, to be able to make sure that he was getting everything that he needed. And, within that school setting, they had close to 50 children, in the classroom. So
it wouldn't be that much attention.
Right. So, the teacher, I remember at one point, she was like, she just broke down crying in one of our parent-teacher conferences. And she was like, it's my first year. And, I got all these kids in the classroom. And she's like, because I'm asking questions. She just got frustrated. She's like, look, I don't know what I'm doing. That's what it is. I don't know what I'm doing. It's like, okay, I get it. But
basically at this point, you're trusting the system to do what they need to do. And it's the system. You have to put the trust in your own hands.
Right. And it was like I was trusting the system and it wasn't working out. And I became really afraid because, it's different with boys. And so, if you let it kind of go on that, they're not getting what they need within that academic setting, I've seen, boys in the community where I grew up end up, getting into the wrong lifestyle, getting in with the wrong crowds because, they weren't able to develop their passions, early on. And, have a love of learning, so to say. And once you start hating school, that's going to go into your whole life path, and how your life path is going to play out, So I made a decision that, I was going to do something different. And I looked for, opportunities to partner with other parents, who were already homeschooling. And I found an African-centered homeschool co-op in 3rd Ward called Sankofa Academy with a sister named Tony Imani Fisher. I think she's actually going to be opening it back up this year. But so the co-op, had about 10 students at that time. And it was like $400 a month. And I was a single mom, in 3rd Ward, going to University of Houston. And I'm like, man, I'm not going to be able to pay the $400 a month, that they're talking about. But, I was able to teach. So I was like, okay, can I teach in exchange for, the tuition? And they were very happy to, to barter with me, so to say. So that's how we got into homeschooling. And, I had the other teachers there while I was in my classes at UH. They were working with my son and the other children. And then I would come in and teach math and art and, yoga. And, we just went back and forth like that. And he just skyrocketed. It was like somebody took like the ceiling off. And, his math, his reading, everything. He started coding every day, and he still codes every day. Since he was 5 years old, for the past 14, 15 years. He has been coding every day since we started that in homeschool. So it went into him enjoying his experience of school, but also being able to thrive within his experience. And I found a new freedom with that. we were able to go and, enroll him at, the nature center, into science classes that took place in the mornings on a Tuesday, for example, something that, I didn't even know existed, and he was able to look at algae, from the water under the, microscope within that setting and analyze owl pellets, little poop from the birds and all that stuff, right? And it's like, that's something that he would have never been able to do within a school setting unless we were able to afford him going to a private school, right? So yes, I recognize that each student needs that, individual personalized approach to be able to thrive. But also, I recognize that with homeschooling, you can give your child a private school level education on a public school budget, so to say, right. Or a single mom budget, or, a family that's below the poverty line budget, whatever that is for you, you can still give your child that high quality level of education, regardless. So, recognizing that, I brought that into, working with students one-on-one and in group classes over the years. And my schedule just really started to, fill up just more and more and more and more over time to where I wasn't able to have as much quality of life. But, I cared about my students, so much that it was like, I'm not going to stop working with them or stop, giving them what they need. So generally, if you have like a teacher or even if you have a tutor that, you have your children working with, they're probably just going to be working with that person for 1 year, max, right? But being in an independent setting, I had children that I was working with for years and years and years, through all their grade levels. And it's like, I'm continuing to add more children onto that. And my quality of life just started becoming like less and less. And I recognized that for me to be able to serve the maximum number of students and still maintain quality for them and also quality of life for myself, that I had to change the way that I was doing what I was doing.
The system.
The system, exactly, and build a team around it, right? But first, I needed to develop a curriculum because for something to be successful beyond yourself, it has to be replicable. So I did my master's in education with a focus in curriculum and instruction and instructional technology, all that, at the University of Houston. And I developed, a curriculum for the students, going all the way from, we started out with kindergarten through 8th grade, and then we added on, 9th through 12th grade, like around the second year. And, once I had the curriculum, I just put it out there and, started telling my friends like, hey, I'm going to be starting a school. One of my friends that, had a lot of experience in education, but she was doing her own thing. She had a full schedule. Like I wouldn't have even imagined that she would decide to come and, work with me. Swatara Olushala, she was like, oh, I'm going to teach with your school.
It's the cause.
Right. And it was like, certain things I think are just meant to be, right? And it just comes together. It's kind of like that old movie. I can't remember the name of it. You might, but it's like build it and they will come. Right. So yeah, I put it out there, and then she actually started recruiting, other qualified teachers for me. And, another friend of mine that, had about 25 years experience in education, Juniper Burnett, COVID just happened to hit that year. She was actually running a whole brick and mortar school during this time. But she wanted to transition to being online, because COVID ended up hitting the same year that I started the school. And she decided she was going to partner with us and bring her students over to join Whole Living Academy and, just continue to, add on to that on the online platform, right? So, I had other friends who were educators, and it just all came together where, within a matter of weeks, we had, a full roster of teachers, and between the students that I had, taught in the past and, others that, they referred, we ended up having, a nice sized roster of students, over 30 students just starting out that first semester. And we continue to grow from there just by making sure that we're providing quality education, to the children every day. And we are online, it's through Zoom, so to say, right? Video conferencing. We may not always use Zoom, so I don't want to shout them out too much.
Right.
But through video conferencing. And the students log on 5 days a week. They're not in class 8 hours a day because students don't actually need to be in class for 8 hours a day. 8 hours, that parallels the workday.
Right.
You need your children to be gone for 8 hours a day so you can go to work. But the children don't need to be in class for 8 hours a day to be able to continue to advance within the material, especially if you're able to really focus on each child and give them that attention. They might only need 2 hours, 3 hours, a day to be able to, advance at a high level. So, we have about 4 hours of classes on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays for the core classes. Kind of like if you think about college and how college is structured, but they're getting introduced to that model, very early on. And then on Tuesdays and Thursdays, we have our electives classes they can choose from. So that ranges from mindfulness, Kiswahili, Spanish, so that they have the choice of multiple foreign languages, including an African language, because most schools, unfortunately, don't introduce our children, to any languages from our historical cultures. We also offer personal finance and wealth building, drawing and digital art, theater, music, an emotional awareness class, for boys and for girls. That one's gender separated so they can really talk without being self-conscious about, what the girl gonna think or, what the little boy gonna think of it. We do coding. So, really a wide range of electives so that, they can be prepared to be, at their highest potential as adults and, have a good understanding of how to be a whole person, like whole living academy. Like, you don't want to just go through school, but then you don't know anything about how to invest in the stock market.
Right, because school doesn't teach you how to be a functional citizen
right.
in the world. They just teach you the 1, 2, 3s and ABCs.
Right.
And if you get it, you get it. You don't, you don't.
Right.
But what you're saying is that y'all teaching them how to be a whole person.
How to be a whole person. And that's why it's called Whole Living Academy.
Got
right. So it's like, within our personal finance and wealth building class, they do learn the basics of finances. You have to understand, checking accounts and, savings accounts and, that you need to bring in more money than what you're spending, those basics first. But then we go way beyond that. They go into, understanding, the stock market, for example, and how to research stocks, how to invest into the stock market, how to understand even cryptocurrencies. We also go into how to develop passive income streams, and they start working on that, very early on. We have multiple students who already have full businesses. Matter of fact, I'll tell you a great story. So one of my students, this is actually her senior year, this 23-24 year that we're coming into right now is her senior year. So she's only 16 years old, and she's been with us, for the past 3 years or so, right? Mm-hmm. And she lives in Canada. She's planning to go to medical school once, she finishes high school and college. So, she's brilliant and she's like focused. Everything that you say, she's paying attention, she's taking it in, and she's using it. So, we talked about like creating products for passive income. She ended up getting some like African, jewelry, like what I have on here, and setting up a drop shipping store with the jewelry, to be able to bring in, mostly passive income for herself. And then she was also, working part-time in a clothing store, within her community. We talked about how savings accounts are low interest, instead of high interest, and that if they want something high interest to put their money into, they could even look into certain types of savings accounts depending on what their goals are. For example, they have special savings accounts for students who are preparing for college, where they can get a higher interest rate, but they have to use that money towards their college education. Now, Canada is a little bit different than the U.S. She looked into that with her family. They got her one of those high interest savings accounts. But in Canada, it's 30%. So, she just put her money, like 100% of her paycheck, into this account every month, for this past couple years. So we had our conversation about, her getting ready for college and for medical school. The other night, we're on the phone late. That's another thing. It's like when you have an independent school, you're able to just kind of meet people where they are. If they're in different countries, you can talk to them, anytime. It's not like because you're living your purpose. It's not like, oh man, I still got to be on the job. It's 10 p.m. It's like you're living your purpose. So you're excited about it. So we're on the phone late. We're talking. She's like, yeah, so I put in about $22,000 so far. But with the interest, it's at about $30,000 US right now. And this is a 16-year-old who is taking what she's learned in class and applied it to save up $30,000 for college, right? Now, the plan that we're doing for her is to take her prerequisites out of college, in the U.S., and then from there to go to Cuba, to go to medical school, and then come back to take her steps, which is like your USMLE medical examinations that you have to take in the United States if you go to medical school in another country. Now, I don't know if you know or if the listeners know, but if you're like a Black or Latino student in the U.S., you can go to medical school in Cuba for free.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so medical school in the U.S. can generally run you between $200,000 and $300,000. Instead of you having that, $200-something thousand in debt that you have to pay back once you start working, if you go over to Cuba, get your medical degree there, right? Then you can actually just come back afterwards and focus on your exams to have your MD recognized in the United States.
Right.
And the exams are only like $3,000, instead of being, $200 plus $1,000. And once you take those exams, you can work anywhere in the world. So with a situation like that, it's like, that child was able to take, what she learned, put that into practice, save that money. She'll be able to use that money to actually pay for her whole undergraduate experience that she's going to have in the U.S. and then transition from there to Cuba. And from there, just come back, use another part of the money to take her exams. And then boom, she's a doctor and she didn't have to take out any student loans.
Wow.
So that's life-changing. You taking $200,000 off somebody's back just by them being empowered on the front end to know what to do, to know what steps to take, right? And that's, again, why the individualized approach is so important.
Right. So what do you think the biggest misconception that parents have when it comes to, private schools? In our community specifically.
I think that, in terms of misconceptions, parents look at, anything that's going to be private, a private school, a private home school, where you have to pay tuition. They feel like they can't afford it. But it really depends on your perspective, because depending on your situation, it might be that you can't afford not to.
Talk about it.
So if we look at, for example, let's say you have a family and, they're thinking like, okay, Whole Living Academy, y'all going to be charging something over $300, dollars a month, depending on which program that you're going into with us. And, that's not something that's in my budget. I can just send my child to school for free. If you have a great school in your area, by all means, send your child to school for free. Let them get that public education that your tax dollars pay for. If that is a great school in your area, like, we are not against public schools, right? But let's say that you're not living in a great area. Let's say that the school that your child is zoned to is not going to meet their specific needs, or that there's a lot of violence that takes place there. There are a lot of negative influences around the community. Let's say that they don't have all the materials that they need within the classroom, or that the classrooms are too overfull and there are 40, 50 children in the classroom and your child is never going to be able to get personalized attention. Then maybe, you need to make a little adjustment here and there, and, maybe you don't have, the same frappuccinos, or,
right.
Maybe you don't, go to a certain concert, every month or whatever. You make whatever adjustments that you have to, so that your child is able to get what they need to be able to thrive.
Correct.
And not just to, perform on a basic level, or even, now it's really under a basic level. If you look at the statistics right now, most children in the U.S., especially like post that first big wave of COVID, most children in the 3rd grade are not reading fluently. That's not how we grew up. Us that are like in our 30s, like, when we were growing up, like, if you were in the 3rd grade, you were reading. But with the interruption that happened, because of the pandemic, children coming out of school, the schools not being prepared really to transition to online.
Right.
So they're just like,
hit the schools.
Right. So they're just like, oh, we're just going to review for 2 years. We're not even going to introduce new materials. Some schools did that. Some schools just, kind of threw a bunch of worksheets on, their learning management systems like Schoology. And we're just like, okay, you navigate that, and didn't offer any live classes to support the students. Some schools offered live classes, but only during certain times of day. So they would have like 500 students, in one class, so they could just come in and like, it would be like the whole grade level. Just come into that one class, for math. So it's like, okay, y'all got something, but, the kids, if you got 500 students in a class, they playing in the chat box.
Yeah, you can't keep
They doing
over
other stuff, they're not really engaging with the material. So a lot of children, and it's not all schools. Some schools handled COVID really well, but most of them didn't. And, so now you have a lot of students who are really behind, so if that's your situation, you may need to transition to homeschool. Maybe you need to transition to homeschool so your children can get where they need to be. And then you can put them back into public school. Some people do that, or maybe, if you have the means and the time, to devote to it, then maybe you just need to, keep them with homeschool, or even with the private school, in your area. But just look at your options and determine what's really going to be best for your child. And that may not always align with what's best for you as an adult. It might not be best for your work schedule. It might not be best for your finances. But if it's what's best for your child, then you make whatever accommodations that you need to make sure that your child is getting what they need.
Right, because they'll pay for it later in life. Either way it goes, it's going to,
Right, exactly. They'll pay for it, positively or negatively,
Right.
however you want to take that,
Right.
So, yeah, definitely. So we just have to decide what's going to be best, again, for each, individual child. And then, make that decision, even if you have to take a different job. Even if, you have to move to a different location. If you want to put your child in a public school, but the public schools in your area are not good, and you're like, no, I don't want to homeschool. I don't want to do online school. I don't want to, pay for private school. You might need to move. Whatever decision it is that you need to make sure that they're able to continue to grow to their potential.
Right.
Because it makes a big difference. And then we look up, and we say like, okay, well, why are so many of our girls going in this direction and, following, I don't even want to name any names,
I know
but
I know where you're going.
following the negative role models, or, why is it that, the boys are, I thought I did a good job. I made all these sacrifices. I worked 3 jobs, and now, my son is running with the wrong circles, and, he's just staying at home playing video games all day. It's not always even that they end up like going into the prison system or something. A lot of the kids now, they grow up and they'll be in their 20s and they're just not doing anything with their lives. They're just staying at home, playing on the video games instead of, getting up, getting out and getting something, as the song says, right? And so if you want to avoid that, it's not you going to go work 3 jobs that's going to change it.
That kind of
it's
ends
not
to the problem to a certain degree.
Right, because then, there's an attention deficit that's happening. They're not getting the attention from you that they really need because, you're always at work, but you're thinking like, oh, this is how I'm going to be able to provide for my child on the highest level. Like, maybe that's not how to provide for your child on the highest level. Maybe you need to look into some alternatives, just like, for example, 4 of our teachers right now actually live in Africa, and they're all American, and they moved to Africa, to be able to have a different cost of living, a different lifestyle, and so on, right? So one of the families, Mama Swatara Olushala, her family, they have, 6 children. So, married couple, 6 children, family of 8. So, I mean, what is the cost of living going to look like in the United States for a family of 8?
It's not going to be pretty.
It's not.
Right.
Like I can't even add it up. Like, you're coming above, 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 a month. Like, it seems like you're just going to need more and more and more and more and more, in that setting because it even depends on the children's ages as they continue to grow. Because once the first one goes to college, paying for college for that one, paying for college for the next one.
Right.
Number 3, number 4, number 5. Even if they were able to get a great deal on college and it was just $100,000 for each one of them, that's $600,000.
Out the gate is half.
Just for college, right? Mm-hmm. But they decided to move to East Africa, to Rwanda. They have a beautiful 5-bedroom house in Rwanda with a big yard. They have a farm where they're growing, fruit, vegetables. They have animals out there, everything. $500 a month.
Wow.
And they're building their own. Like, they bought land, they're building their own stuff so that long term, they're not going to have to pay rent. You can build a house out there for, $25,000, that's pretty big, or $50K. You're looking at something more like a mansion, right? So it's just, figuring out what's going to be best for you. And I'm not saying everybody needs to move to Africa. You might find something that works for you in the United States. You might find something that works for you in Costa Rica. But just know that the whole world is open to you.
Right.
You don't have to feel like, oh man, the only way I can survive is if, I'm able to get a job that's going to be making $150K a year because of this, rise in inflation that's happening. The only way I'm going to be able to survive is I can't even get a job making $150K a year because I don't have the education right now. So I have to work, 3 jobs, and I have to be away from my children and only spend 10 minutes with them every day, just to be able to, provide a certain quality of life for them. Because they need to have, the best clothes, and they need to have these new shoes, and they need to have, the Xbox and the PS5 and, all the things that I didn't have, right? But that attention is not there. And they're not getting the attention from you, and they're not getting the attention from the school because they got 40, 50 other children in the classroom, competing with them, for attention. So how are they going to turn out? I mean, maybe great. Maybe they turn out great. It's just a coin toss,
Right.
Do you really want to take that chance on your children, or do you want to give them the best opportunity to succeed? And that's just one facet of it. All of this is just one facet of it. We haven't even talked about the cultural piece and how that plays in.
Let's talk about it.
Well, okay, let me ask you. Back when you were in public school growing up, you know, when did you learn about Imhotep being the first doctor in history?
I mean, yeah, it didn't happen.
It didn't happen? Okay, well, at what point when you were in public school growing up did you learn about, you know, African people inventing mathematics and, you know, astronomy and breaking down the calendar year and
yeah, all that stuff you had to go seek for yourself.
Right, exactly. And what if you didn't have to seek it for yourself? What if you learned that from jump? Like, how would that change your perception of yourself, your perception of the world, and even your perception of what you're able to accomplish within the world, right? So that's the cultural piece. You know, our school is for us, and I'll just say us, and you can take what you want to take from that, right? It has that cultural foundation to make sure that the children have a strong understanding of history. And not even just those bits that I just told you, but history as a whole and the truth about us within that history, right? So that they'll be prepared for life on a holistic level by having a holistic understanding of themselves.
Understood. Okay, so we're talking about the culture, but before that, we gave a lot of attention to kids needing attention.
Yes.
So, in your estimation, what is the difference between a child who doesn't get attention and a child who does in the school system?
It depends on the child. You know, some children can succeed without getting a lot of attention. You know, some children, they just kind of, you know, have that confidence within themselves for whatever reason, where they're able to, you know, just do their thing. You just put it in front of them and they just run with it. Whatever you give them, you know, they're going to do their best to master it. But those children are generally few and far between.
Right.
So, you know, on the other hand, you have, you know, the majority of children who need to get a certain level of attention to be able to thrive. So I'll give you an example. I worked in a public school. I won't name the school, but it's a public school here in Houston, a charter school. Back in like 2015, you know, I went in and taught writing class for 7th grade. And they told me you can't spend more than 90 seconds with each student or we can take disciplinary action against you as a teacher, which was just like, what are you talking about? What are you saying? I can't spend more than 90 seconds with each student because there were certain students that were so behind. I had a 15-year-old in the 7th grade class and he could barely read. You know, so I'm going over and I'm like, okay, this is how you do it. He was like, oh yeah, I understand. And I was like, wow, great. Like, you do want to learn. You know, the way they was talking about you, I thought you didn't want to learn.
Right.
You know, I go back and I'm telling my dean on the level, I'm like, oh yeah, such and such, like, he can learn. Like, he wants to learn the material. He just needs a little bit of extra help. No,
90
because
seconds.
you have 180 students on your roster. So just mathematically, if you spend more than 90 seconds with each student, the other students are suffering because of that. And that was the way that, you know, they presented it to me. So I was like, okay, well, what help can he get? If I can't work with him, who can?
Right.
You know, so they said, okay, we have a learning specialist who's going to be coming in and working with students that, you know, need to get caught up. You know, so don't worry about it. You know, we're going to have a meeting next week. We'll have the learning specialist there. I'm like, oh, okay, great. You know, we got something. All right, cool. We go to the meeting with the learning specialist. She says, write down the 2 students that you feel need the most help. I'm like, oh, yeah, I know exactly which 2 students need the most help. Okay, she's like, no, not per class, per grade level. She was talking about on the whole 7th grade
Just 2
level of the school. It was like, yes, hundreds of children on the 7th grade level for the whole school. And she was saying, we can only take 2. She's like, I'm like, what? Like, what are you saying? She's like, no, I'm the learning specialist, not just for this school, but for the whole system. So I can only take 2 students from each grade level from each school.
Wow.
Because I have to work with all the students in the whole charter school system. And I'm like, okay, so what are we going to do about this 15-year-old? Like, what's happening with him? So then my dean is like, well, if you want to work with him, you can work with him during your lunch hour. So I'm like, all right, you know, like, are y'all testing me? See how committed I am? Or like, what's going on? You trying to make me give up on him? You know, like, I'm like, okay, you know, I'm going to come in. I'm going to come in my lunch hour. You know, I'm just going to eat some Skittles at my desk or something. I'm not going to try to go get healthy foods. I'm just going to stay right here and work with him during my lunch hour. And I'm like, man, he's 15. You know, at this point, like, me and my lunch hour can't be his only lifeline.
Right.
To be able to save him from whatever comes next if he doesn't have basic skills. They were just passing him to the next grade level. Just pass him, pass him, pass him. So I'm like, all right, look, they don't care about you. Like, you're on your own, really. So if you want to be able to have a good life, then you need to have some skills. So what can you do? Is there any talent that you have? He's like, I guess I can kind of draw a little bit. I'm like, okay, so let's lean into that. So I want you to draw me a picture. I'm going to go run to the dollar store. I'm going to get you a frame. We're going to frame the pictures that you draw, and then you can sell those. And that'll be your start, you know, into learning how to make money from yourself, but in a legal way, you know. So he started drawing. He's focused. You know, he did a really great picture, actually. I went and got him a frame, framed it up. You know, he kept drawing every day. I kept framing him up. So I said, okay, now you got your first body of work. We're going to see if the other teachers can be your first customers. I go to the other teachers in the teacher's lounge. I'm like, oh, you know, such and such student, he did these. You know, we're focusing on his entrepreneurship, so he has some life skills to work with. They're like, he did that? I'm like, yeah, he did. They're like, I'm not going to buy his work. I'm not buying his art. I'm like, why? You don't like it? They're like, nah, he just doesn't pay attention in my class. I'm not supporting his art.
Wow.
I'm like, this is a child. Like, you're holding resentment against a child for not paying attention in your class? And it was like they hated him. They wouldn't even, I had to give my own money and make him think that the other teachers bought his art.
Wow.
Because they acted like they had like just like a vendetta against him, you know, or some resentment towards him because of him not being able to succeed in the classroom. And they felt like that was a personal affront against them instead of trying to figure out how to meet his needs, right? And I don't know what happened to that student. You know, like, I don't know where he is today. But what I do know is that he's in his mid-20s. So wherever he is, I hope that he was at least able to take, you know, that little piece that we were able to do together, focusing on his entrepreneurship, and translate it into something positive within his life experience. And I know that as an instructor, I was at least able to give him that to run with, right? So yeah, when we talk about attention for students, it's like, it depends on the student, but most students do need to have attention to thrive. And some students have, you know, special needs where they need a lot more attention. And if they don't get that attention, then what kind of life are they going to have?
Right. And also what you're saying too is to find a teacher that's going to take that much time and energy to put into you, that's like the stars just lining up, because the system is set up in a way to where as a teacher, you're going to get punished for trying to help an individual.
Right,
student.
like you're on a plantation.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Like, don't do that.
Man.
What master going to say?
What is the response from the students and the parents when y'all have these cultural things that y'all teach?
Yeah, so because we introduced it early on, it just becomes a part of who they are, rather than it being something that, is foreign to them. And it's like, wow, now I know this. I've been lied to my whole, like, they've never been told, for the most part, that Christopher Columbus discovered America.
Right.
So they don't have this framework of like, I've been lied to. Now these lies are being dismantled, unless they're, just kind of coming in from public school, but for the most part, it's like they're learning the truth from the beginning, right? Or at least as early on as possible.
It's not unlearned.
Right, exactly. So it's not a response like, oh my gosh, it's more of a response of, if you were to talk to one of our students and you were to say, well, tell me about the history of, colonialism, they'd be like, what do you want to know about? Do you want to know about the scramble for Africa? Or what are you asking me? Do you want to know more about, what happened in West Africa when countries started gaining their independence? They would be able to approach it from that perspective, instead of it being like just, these little tidbits or lost on it or whatever. They're able to tell you who Kwame Nkrumah is, or even Kwame Ture, and, what those individuals did, right? They're able to tell you not just when the first human ancestor was found and where, but also when written history started. And how that looked, and what was that progression, of written history throughout time. But they can also tell you like all the organs in the body, and identify different elements on the periodic table, and, tell you how many protons or electrons or neutrons that it has. Even from, a very early age, we start introducing chemistry around, the 4th, 5th grade, with our students. So they're able to approach things in a way that within the public school system, we just don't have the freedom to be able to, instill into the students. We have a lot more freedom to be able to give them more, and like Feels Free was saying, they want everybody to suffer the same in most cases. Not in all cases. Some schools, are exceptional. But in most cases, they want everybody to suffer the same. And in Whole Living Academy, we want everybody to thrive, not even the same, but to thrive to their highest potential. Because everybody has different levels.
Myself in the 4th, 5th, 6th grade, I had 4 black teachers in that span. And it seems, just in my overall thought process, that those 4 black teachers were more invested in me. I was wondering, although you have the cultural piece, how important is it to have us taught by someone who looks like us?
Well, just like you said.
If you had to compare, if you took out the cultural piece, I would say that having someone that looks like me teach me something is just as important.
Yes. So it's just like you said, those teachers, it seemed like you were able to get more from them. And it's probably because they felt more invested in you than, a teacher who's not from your same, ethnic group is going to feel. And so some of the things that I've heard kind of being on both sides of the fence, so to say, like when I was, teaching in that charter school system, when I heard white teachers specifically, well, not just white, but white and Latino really, and no disrespect to any, ethnicity, this was just my experience within that particular school system. When they talked about the children, the black children, they would use words like unfixable.
Unfixable.
Unfixable. And this was when they were around other teachers, not in front of the children. But that energy they were bringing back to the children within the classroom, right? And, we're in Texas. So, in Texas, you got, a whole different level of racism, when it comes to especially certain communities, certain neighborhoods, you have a different level of racism. So I'm not saying that it's even like this everywhere, But, the teachers can definitely be biased in a way where they look at, white and Asian children more positively and, generally look at, Black and Latino children more negatively. So if you are, Latino and you can get into a situation where you have a Latino homeschool co-op and you're focusing in on, your history and your culture, primarily within the curriculum and not, learning about the heroes of the Alamo, so to say, but, the truth about that whole situation, your child is going to be better off. If you're a Jewish person, Jewish people often put their children into Jewish schools so that they can be able to get a certain level of attention and a certain level of care and respect from the teachers that they might not get within another environment. And by the same token, with our school serving, children from the African diaspora, meaning Black folks all over the world, right? Then, our teachers reflect that, and also our curriculum reflects that. So they're able to get not just the history, not just the culture, not just the holistic piece, for their emotions and well-being, but, also get the care, also get the love, also get the respect, and every one of our teachers cares about our students as if that's their child or their niece or their nephew, instead of, just looking at them as being a paycheck. So that's also a factor.
So in essence, if you look at school curriculum in and of itself is I don't want to, I'll say simplistic, but I don't mean it in that way. I mean math, science, English. Those things are relatively easy to learn if you put somebody in the right situation. But the biggest thing in those particular years is building self-confidence in a person so that he can use those things later on. And if you create the proper environment, then that'll happen. People can learn, but if they don't have the confidence to use that knowledge, then what is it for? And if you put yourself around people who understand you culturally, then you're aiding in being able to use that knowledge later on.
Absolutely, because it's not even so much about what you learn as that you nurture the ability to learn and the ability to think critically and the ability to be adaptive to any situation. Because whatever you learn, it's never going to be enough. It's never going to be enough to really be successful in life. You can teach children how to do, coding with Python, and then 5 years from now, they're not even using Python anymore. It's some new thing. It's Anaconda, instead of Python. You teach them, how to write essays, and you focus on that. And then 5 years from now, nobody's writing essays anymore. They're just using AI for essay writing, and they really need to have other skills to be able to be successful. But if they know how to learn, they know how to think critically, they know how to be adaptive, they love learning, and they haven't lost that zest, right? Then whatever comes their way in life, they're going to be able to navigate it. And that's really the most important thing. Because if all you're focused on is just, okay, we're going to get you to pass this standardized test. And when you pass the standardized test, you can go to the next grade. And they're just memorizing things. If you're thinking about true learning, you can use Bloom's taxonomy as a model of understanding, right? And if you're just memorizing things, you just have the ability to describe it. That's on the most basic level of Bloom's taxonomy. So you're not really getting into, analysis or synthesis, at that level, right? And when you're on the level of analysis or synthesis, that's where it's most transferable to life success versus just rote memorization. If all you know how to do is memorize stuff, then you can easily be replaced by somebody working virtually from the Philippines for $1 an hour within whatever job that you go into. But if you really want to be competitive on a global level, then you have to be able to think on a higher level, and you're not going to do that by, just learning facts to get ready for standardized tests.
So basically what you're saying is that the primary goal of your school is to actually take knowledge and ultimately be able to apply that knowledge.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And by having the small group class sizes and, being able to really talk with the students, that's how we're able to accomplish that. We're not giving them tests for the purpose of them just being able to recall the information. We're having discussions about the information. We're putting it into projects. We're applying the scientific method and going into experiments, within that field, right? Instead of just like, okay, well, tell me, what are the first 7 elements on the periodic table, or what are the groups of the periodic table? It's like, what are you going to do with that? Like, how are you going to apply that to anything? Even to understanding chemistry, that's not even helping you to understand chemistry. But if I tell you like, okay, so you see we have lithium here, right? What can you find in your house that contains lithium? And then they go and they look around and they bring back a battery. They're not going to forget that. They're not going to be like, oh, no, I don't know. I have no idea like what lithium is. They'll be like, oh, yeah, lithium, that's what's in batteries. Okay, can you find something in your house that contains chlorine? And we did this experiment. One of the children, he had a swimming pool at his house. And he took his device and ran over to the swimming pool and like pointed the camera at the pool. And he's like, chlorine, So it's not something that you'll easily forget, instead it's now something that's really embedded into you, right? So yes, absolutely. Our goal is to be able, for the children to be able to take what they're learning and apply it, within their lives, or even just within, an academic setting. Like we have students who are transitioning into various fields, who are transitioning into medical school, transitioning into flight school, culinary. We have students that are preparing to become nurse anesthesiologists, registered nurses. It really just goes, across the spectrum in terms of, what students' interests are and, where they're going to go in life with that. So whatever it is that they're doing, we want them to be prepared for it. And we even have conversations about their goals often from very early on. Even if they're just 8 years old right now and they know like, hey, I want to be a registered nurse when I grow up. Like, okay, let's talk about that. So that from the beginning, they understand that we care about what it is that they want to become, but also so that they understand how to apply what they're learning to the path that they're taking. For example, I have one student, I'm going to shout him out, Caden, and he's a visual artist, he's a martial artist, and he's also like super passionate about becoming a nurse anesthesiologist. Like, when we have costume days, he wears scrubs, like he's set on it. He knows what he wants to do. That's his path, right? So when I talk about math with him, it's from that perspective. It's like, okay, you need to be able to understand math on a higher level because you are going to have higher scores in math and science to be able to, get into that next level of education, past your basics, in college. And by him understanding that, he's able to apply himself more seriously now to come to extra tutoring classes for math, whatever he needs to do to be advanced, even though, initially math didn't come easily to him. But he was willing to persevere through the struggle because of us connecting it to his life goal, right? So yes, I don't even remember the question that you asked anymore, but that's the answer.
Basically, the template of school is
yes.
that you figure out a child's learning style. you cultivate to their learning style without sacrificing your curriculum.
Right.
You make sure that the knowledge within that cultivated style is put in a way where it can be utilized later on. And if they're particularly interested in something, you have electives that cultivate that also. So it can all go into applied knowledge through a learning basis that fits them.
Yes, absolutely. And what I would add to that is that we shift the electives based on the students that we have. So in that sense, we operate in more of a co-op model than a private school model. You know, with private schools, it's like, boom, this is the curriculum. This is it. Take it or leave it. You know, we don't do that. You know, if we have a student who has a special interest in French, you know, we'll say, okay, let's see if we can find a couple other parents who would also like for their child to learn French, and we'll start a French class. You know, we have a student who has a special talent for theater right now. So we added theater as a class on the roster. You know, at first it was like we would just do a little bit of, you know, theater within our English language arts class. And, you know, I saw that he had this talent, you know, and he talked about it with me and told me what his dreams and his goals are. And so, you know, based on that, we launched a theater class this summer and continued it, you know, into this upcoming school year. And we had 2 guest speakers to come in. You know, I have a lot of friends, you know, who are in different industries. A couple of these friends have been in a lot of major feature films, you know, and I had both of them to come and, you know, talk during our summer program and give special attention to this particular child who wants to do theater for real, right? Telling him, you know, how to get into doing his castings, you know, if he needs an agent or not, what that means, like just breaking everything down to him to be able to get into this as a child and start making money from it, you know, right away, while also continuing to develop his craft. And it's like, that's something, again, that we have the freedom to do because of being independent. The other piece that I would add to it is that there are some students that, because of their specific needs, they need more than what can be accomplished in any group setting. And with those students, we also add one-on-one tutoring for them.
It's interesting. Basically, you're talking about exposure, and that's a very important thing. People don't realize public schools is basically a box. Your children are only going to be exposed to what they want you to be exposed to, and exposure to different things can change the trajectory of children. Just like you said,
yes.
you can figure out what a child is interested in and expose them to that thing, and it changes their whole life. And
yes.
that is a liberty that a private school or homeschooling, you have those liberties.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's like, we can do something just on the spot. We can pivot and introduce something on the spot based on the needs of a specific student. So for example, the student I was telling you about, Caden, I shared with you, he's also a martial artist. And he's about 13 years old now. He's about to turn 13 this year anyway. Which is crazy when you think about it, because I'm saying all this about him having his mind made up about being a nurse anesthesiologist and us cultivating him on that path. But it's like, he's 12. And that's another thing about homeschool. But anyway, one day during the summer program, we were in our holistic health class and we were going over fitness. And I wanted to have one of the children to demonstrate some of the exercises that they can do at home. You know, when you're at home, you're working on the computer. We don't advocate children just sitting on the computer all day and not moving their bodies. You know, you can even enroll them in YMCA or something, you know, so that they're getting some exercise, right? But if they're not getting out of the house, they have to know how to still have that exercise routine. So I asked Caden, I said, Caden, you know, can you walk us through, you know, a warm up, show us how to do a correct push up, you know, some burpees, jumping jacks, so on. He was like, yes, absolutely. He got into it. He was like, okay, so you have to have your elbows like this. And this is a military push-up, but this one you can try if you're in a modified position. And I mean, he explained it better than I've ever heard an adult explain, how to go through a workout correctly. And it was like, wow, like this is a talent for you. Like you could be a personal trainer while you're in school to be able to have, money for things that, you may need, in that in-between time. And I have this friend who's a personal trainer who, with his business, he ends up, making several $100,000, per year, right? Based on the model that he's created. He owns about 10 gyms around Houston. I called him on the spot and I was like, hey, can you pop into the Zoom and talk to my student? I want you to see what he's doing right now and how he leads this workout. And he was like, yeah, he's got talent. He just came to the Zoom and he's like, yeah, he got talent, and broke it down to him how he developed his personal training business, told him all the steps. You can't do that, like you can't do that within certain, structured settings, because it's like, first of all, how are you going to do it? Like there's not a vehicle to be able to just say like, boom, let me bring this person into the classroom. Even though they're driving down 59 right now, they're able to come into the classroom and talk to this child who's in Maryland, right? You have to be within a very specific type of setting to be able to even coordinate something like that. And like you said, it's exposure. Within the independent environment, we're able to expose the children to whatever it is that they need to be able to truly thrive. And we have a really cool collection of parents too. One of our families is the Campbell family, who you may be familiar with as, Mary, right? But Erica Campbell's husband is also an amazing individual. Warren Campbell, he has produced a ton of, Grammy nominated and Grammy award winning, artists over the years. If you look at his, biography, like even Kanye West is one of the artists that he's worked with extensively, for example. But he's a dad, just like, any other dad within the program, right? So if we're talking about financial literacy and he's right there, he'll come over and put the kids on game, like right there in that moment. And it's like, how are you going to have the opportunity within a public school for, even a parent that's on that level that doesn't have a lot of free time, to be able to just take 5-10 minutes and just tell the children like, well, yeah, it's not just about this, but also, just for example, he shared with us that he produced music for a video game. And it made him, I don't remember exactly how much, but it was, something like close to 100,000, something like that, just for, small piece of music for this one video game, right? It's like, even if you're interested in music, at what point are you going to be able to find like that specific piece of information saying like, you can take this interest that you have in music and translate that into creating a song for a video game and be able to have enough money to live off for the whole year. Right?
So basically you're during that particular age group, it's like we don't introduce kids to possibilities, we introduce them to a box. And what you're saying is that I introduce them to the possibilities.
Right, absolutely. Right, the possibilities and like how to get there, like how to get to the other side of those possibilities, so that it's not just an idea, but you also have a strategy to partner with that idea to accomplish whatever your specific goals are.
Talk about kids with deficiencies in learning coming to you.
Yes.
How long does it typically take you to get somebody back on level or past level? Because I know that you've taken kids that are probably below, a couple years below level in your assessment. What is that process generally like?
It really depends on the child. It's different for every child. It's different for every family. And it also depends on what their specific, issues are. and how committed and available that their families are. You know, just for example, we have one child, and I'll call him out by name too, Quayle. He is, his family is from Togo. And so he's Francophone. He speaks French as his first language. And he also speaks the language, you know, from Togo as well, right? But until a couple of years ago, he had not really been reading or writing in English much. So being in a classroom with his peers, you know, on a 5th grade level, and mind you, this child is brilliant, like is genius in so many ways. But, you know, if you were to give him a passage, you know, to read, he wouldn't be able to really read it, right? Because he was so committed to learning to read and write in English. And, you know, his parents were also committed to the process. And, you know, his mother really gave him a lot of support with practicing his reading. Within one school year, he was above grade level with reading and writing English. You know, he was able to master it, you know, very, very quickly. You know, on the other hand, you know, you have students who their parents are not able to spend as much time with them. So even though they're making progress, they may not be making progress as quickly within, you know, a specific subject that, you know, they may be behind in. But, you know, they'll still get there. You know, it just takes more time if the parents are not able to put in the time too, right? So that's why I say it really depends. So I've seen students who have jumped 3 grade levels within one semester, you know, in math or, you know, in English language arts, for example. And then on the other hand, some students, they may, you know, take a whole school year to just kind of, you know, get close to grade level, you know, especially if they're already several grade levels behind. But we don't go by grade levels. We work towards mastery. So we don't judge the students based on that, and we don't project that judgment onto them or onto their parents. You know, we ask that the parents are able to commit as much as they can to their children. And that looks different for every family. You know, with some families, you know, you may have parents, just because somebody's homeschooling, it doesn't always mean they're at home. You know, especially when you talk about older children. You know, we have a couple boys from, Jacksonville, I think, Jacksonville, Florida right now, you know, that were with us for this past school year. They were behind grade level. There was a ton of violence that was going on in this school that they're zoned to. And, you know, a lot of negative influences, you know, involving drugs and just kind of skipping school and so on. Like, they live in the hood, you know, not like the play hood, the real hood. And their mom, I don't even remember how she found out about us, but, you know, she came to us and she wasn't able to afford the tuition. So, you know, we had to work out a barter, you know, for her to be able to get the boys involved in our program. But she wanted to, you know, be able to homeschool them so that they could be in a safe environment and also catch up to grade level until she could get out of that specific neighborhood, you know, and get to somewhere where they could be in a better school, right? And she wasn't able to work with them at all for, you know, various reasons. Like, she couldn't do any homework with them. She couldn't provide any support to them whatsoever at home, you know, for multiple reasons. She had some medical issues and also, you know, her work schedule and so on. But we were able to still work with them to get, you know, at least pretty close to grade level without her doing anything with them, right? So, you know, and they actually moved recently, and they're transitioning back into public school this year in a better area, you know, but now they're more on par with, you know, the other students instead of being behind. So, yeah, we have parents that come from, you know, all different backgrounds, you know, students who come in from, you know, all different levels. You know, it's not always even a learning, you know, difference, or deficiency. I wouldn't even call things deficiencies. It's not always a learning difference. Sometimes it's just they were in a school that was not a good school, or maybe they had to miss a lot of school, during COVID, in their area because they were just doing worksheets in that school district and not doing, in-person school or whatever. So we just handle each family, as an individual family and like, okay, what is it that, your children need? And then we'll work with you on that to be able to get them, to, if we're talking about, grade levels, yes, on or above grade level, but really that's a process of mastery, and working towards mastery in each subject to the best of their ability based on, that specific child. And we do have some children, who are on the spectrum, for example, and, have those types of learning differences. And with that, it's not even always about like trying to get to a certain level, so to say, because it's not a linear path. But, just making sure that they're being engaged on the highest, level energetically every day, right? That you're engaging them intellectually, you're engaging them with positivity and so on, so that they're continuing to enjoy the process of learning and be able to benefit most from it.
Speaking of grade level and transitioning from a private to a public school, homeschool, for the parents that don't understand how that works, how would a public system understand that child, let's say he's supposed to be in the 3rd grade, but he's on the 5th grade level now because he came to you. Or I have a child that's 16, 17, 15 that's ready to graduate. How does that process work?
Yes. So that would be 2 different processes. So let's say, for example, that, we've worked with a child and, age-wise, they would be in 3rd grade. But, intellectually, they're on a 5th grade level. They have, several different options available to them, also based on their area that they live in. Like ideally, of course, students will just stay with us all the way through high school graduation. But, sometimes people come to us because of COVID, and then they want to transition, the children back in, or maybe the parent is a travel nurse and, they're moving around a lot, but then they're going to be stable for a while. So they want to, try out a school in their area, whatever that reason is that they're going back into the public school system. They can choose in some states to register them in a higher grade level. And that would depend, again, on their state and their district. So we've had children, for example, one of my students, Nandi, she transitioned in the 10th grade from homeschooling with us when she was 13 years old. And she actually just graduated high school, and she received an Amazon Future Scholarship for $40,000. So it was like everything that went into her put her ahead intellectually. She's located in the Maryland area. So, within that specific district that she was in, in Prince George's County, she was able to go ahead, enroll in a higher grade level just based on her report cards that, we created for her. And, then move through that experience, from that higher level to graduate early and even receive scholarships, within that structure that she's in. Of course, we can also graduate students. So, if they graduate with us, they'll get a diploma and they'll be able to, move on and go to college, just like if they graduated from, any other school. If they don't have those accommodations in their area, like some areas, they'll be like, well, we're not going to put your child in a higher grade. I don't care what you did. I don't care if you homeschooled, they're not going to put your child in a higher grade level. Like we had that issue with one family in Chesapeake, Virginia recently, where the school was just like, we don't do that. We don't, transition the children into higher grades. So what we did, we talked to them about testing the children. And then based on their test, within the first 5 weeks of school, when they're able to also see their maturity level, because skipping grades also involves if you're able to be, mature enough to, hang with the older kids, so to say, right? They're either going to move the children to a higher grade level or move them to gifted and talented classes so that they're able to continue to be challenged, right? I had 2 other children this past week who were transitioning into an in-person school for middle school because their father wants them to go to the same alma mater that he went to for high school. And, it's kind of like if you go to this middle school, then you get to go to this high school and so on. And these children have been with us for 3 years. They're far ahead of grade level. So what we did was we applied for something called SAS in Los Angeles. And it's like Schools for Advanced Studies. And it's a special selection of schools that, students can choose from there if, someone signs off. Generally that someone in most states has to have a master's degree, which I do, signs off saying like, okay, this child has been evaluated. They're on a higher level within their core subjects. And then they're able to transition into a school that's specifically for children that are on a higher level. So all of those options, are open to parents, who transition in with us. And then once their students get to a certain place, they want to transition out for whatever reason. Another story is we had a family, the Harden family, amazing children, really amazing children. And, they had been with us for about 3 years and were just thriving, within Whole Living Academy, but they are professional athletes. So, these particular 3 children, they do like, how do you call it? Like, I'm not so much a professional athlete. Is it called a triathlon? Like where you do like the biking and swimming and running? Yeah. So, they would compete in these competitions and, they're winning all types of awards and stuff like that. So, of course, they want to be in an environment where they're able to do as much sports as possible. And so after being with us for a while, their mom was able to apply to a private school in their area that has the largest sports complex in her state of North Carolina. And based on their academics, with us and, taking the test, proving their academics, transitioning into that school, they all received full scholarships, exceeding like $2,500 a month. And that's based on the work that they did with us, as well as the commitment of their parents, right? So there are all kinds of scenarios that can be, created by, just prioritizing what's best for your child. Again, it may be that you decide, to transition them to homeschool just for a season so that they can get to a certain place academically and then be able to transition back in with greater opportunities. Or you may decide to homeschool them all the way through. And either way, it's always going to be of benefit to them. Just, looking at the logic of it. If you have a child, whatever their situation is, whatever their level is, and you put them into a classroom with 30 other children, you can only give them 1/30 of the attention. Like that's just how the logic of it comes down. If they're just with you at home and it's one-on-one, they're going to get more because y'all just one-to-one. So it's guaranteed that they're going to get more. If they're in a classroom with only 9 other students, on video conferencing, they're going to get more because, they get 1/10 of the attention instead of 1/30 of the attention, right?
And logic also dictates that if you're teaching a child the way that they learn, they're going to learn quicker.
Exactly.
If you're in a classroom with 30 people, then it has to be a baseline of how I'm teaching because everybody has to get it.
Exactly. So, things just have to work how they work, so to say. It's just like with the food industry, with agriculture. It's like, you know, we talk about the low quality, and we've had that conversation. We talk about the low quality of foods and, you know, how they have to put all these antibiotics and hormones and, you know, the chickens are in the little cages, you know, and we say like, wow, you know, this system is really bad, but that's how it has to be for, what is it, like, you know, 2% of the population is feeding, you know, the rest of the population, instead of it being like it was, you know, 100 years ago where everybody had their farm or their garden. Like, of course you were going to get higher quality foods, you know, in that capacity. But, you know, if you're not trying to, you know, go raise some chickens now or, you know, have your little farm now, then, you know, you got to take the L or you got to pay more, right? So, you know, by the same token, it's like the industrialization of the education system. You're going to have lower quality because it's an industry. And you have to decide, you know, if you want your child, you know, to get fast food education, or if you want them to get a whole meal, come to Whole Living Academy.
So for a parent who's on the borderline, I'm gonna put my kid in here, I'm not. What
Yeah.
instance of wisdom would you have for them to go ahead and jump over that finish line and put them kids in a private school or homeschool rather?
Right. I would say just be real with yourself, right? Be real with yourself about who you are, about who your child is, about what they need. And don't just think about it from the perspective of what you feel like you can and can't do. Well, you know, I can't leave my job, you know, to stay here at home with them. And, you know, I can't afford to pay this, you know, for them to be able to go to this homeschool or this private school. You know, I can't teach them everything because I don't even remember all that. Once you start thinking about everything you can't do, you're not thinking about what's best for your child. You're just thinking about your limitations, and you're conceptualizing everything from a lack mentality. But if you really start prioritizing what's best for your child, if you know that your child is not getting everything that they need to be able to thrive, then you can restructure your schedule, your life, your finances, whatever you need to do to make sure that your child is getting what they need. You know, that 18 years is going to pass by pretty fast. You know, I remember my son was just a baby, and now he's about to turn 20, and I got a new baby, you know. It's like it just flew by. And if I had made different decisions during that time period of him coming up, I would be seeing the fruits of those decisions right now. You know, now he's 19, he's in college, he's a visual artist, you know, he's a programmer, he knows all these coding languages, you know, he's making his own money, he doesn't have to work for anybody, he's able to, you know, do tutoring for children. The fee that parents pay him when he does tutoring is exceeding $30 an hour, and he's only 19 years old. You know, instead of him having to start, you know, on somebody's fast food line somewhere, he's able to tutor math, Japanese, coding, digital art, you know, so he has all these skills so that you can drop him off anywhere in the world in a parachute and he can just jump out and be successful wherever he is, instead of only being able to be okay within certain environments. And I don't know how to, you know, I don't know how to survive, or I don't know how to succeed if you know, change the situation, or if I lose this one job that I have, right? And that's what we want for all of our children, whatever their specific interests or goals are, is to be able to really thrive within that. If your child is a very talented drummer, and this is a real situation, just thinking, your child is a talented drummer, but he's on the autism spectrum. And the school is not going to be able to really, you know, focus in on his needs, right? He's only going to get, you know, whatever the standard special ed class is that they have with, you know, students who have a lot of different learning needs being boxed together within that same, you know, classroom. You know, instead, you could just pull him out. You know, work with him, you know, put him with Whole Living Academy, or put him with a private tutor, or work with him yourself, whatever you have to do to nurture him becoming a master drummer. And then also working on his academics to the level of mastery that he's able to attain. Because when he gets to be an adult, if you didn't focus in on that thing that was his gift, then he's not really going to be prepared for success. You know, and that's just across the board with whatever your children's gifts are. You know, we have children who are great artists, and, you know, they draw these amazing pictures, and we just say, oh, that's nice, baby, and we just kind of throw it away, or, you know, it ends up just going under the bed and getting torn up. And the only thing that's like different between that child drawing that great picture and this artist that's selling their work for, you know, $100, $200+ is that they were able to identify as an artist. If you're able to tell that child, wow, you're a great artist, let's take this, let's frame this, let's cultivate this, then they'll be able to continue to grow within that. And now they have another way to make money as an adult. Artists make money everywhere in the world, you know. Like,
You provide options for them.
Right, exactly. You know, you got to look at what your children's, you know, gifts are, what their personalities are, and then, you know, make sure that they're receiving every opportunity to nurture their specific gifts, you know, while also being able to work to mastery on the academic side, you know, based on whatever their learning style is and whatever their current level is. And that may sound like a lot, and maybe it is a lot. You know, if you need help, we can help you at Whole Living Academy. So
Right. And this
just reach out to us for a 15-minute phone call, wholelivingacademy.com, and we're happy to help. Even if you don't join us, we'll still help you.
Right.
Yes.
And this is all digital. It's all over Zoom or whatever y'all are using at the moment.
Yes, yes.
So, and I know we winding now, but I'm gonna ask this: do you think that affects the children's social ability?
Well, I mean, is socializing online still socializing? And if it's not, then what is social media? Aha. So everything is online now. You know, most of the parents, you know, now are working from home or working hybrid. You know, sometimes they're working from home. Sometimes they're, you know, they're in person at the job, right? So, I mean, these are skills that the children need to master. Do you not want your child to know how to work from home? And is that going to make them globally competitive if they don't know how to use Zoom and they don't know how to use all these different, you know, applications and features and navigate that? You know, this is really good. What's going to make them most successful, like in the 21st century, is knowing how to navigate that space. But guess what? You can still go outside. Yeah. Nothing's stopping you. You know, take your child to the community center. Take them to the local robotics class. You know, take them to the YMCA and, you know, let them go work out with the other children. Like, our school does not run 8 hours a day. So you have time to, you know, take that other 3 or 4 hours and go do something outside with your child and have them socialize within your community. There are millions of homeschooling families across the United States and even more across the world. So whatever community that you live in, if you just Google homeschool events, you know, for your city, you're going to see a ton of cool stuff pop up. And you get a whole new community to socialize with. Personally, I think that's a better community to socialize with. The reason why is because, let's say I'm going to take my child to a free creative writing class for homeschoolers over at Discovery Green. That's a fun experience. Like, you get to go do creative writing. You can play at the park. You're outside. You know, you're getting fresh air. You're getting grass. You're not just having to sit inside the classroom and be forced to, like, write the same essay over and over and over again because you're trying to, you know, get the format right for when you have to take your next standardized test. Right. Right? You know, if you go, like here in Houston, they have a ton of different, you know, free or low cost events for homeschooling families. Like, even at places like where they have all the trampolines and the kids are jumping. It used to be Sky World, but they have a new one here now. They have a homeschool event that they do every week. And so you can go over there and get your exercise by jumping on the trampolines. At Lowe's and Home Depot, they have classes for children to learn how to build like bird houses and things like that. And they're totally free, right? But if you're not homeschooling, how would you know? And would you rather have your child like just be stuck in a classroom, or, you know, getting out and being able to have those experiences? You know, not to say that anything is wrong with public school once again, but just that, you know, you can do more and you have the option to do more. So if you can do more, why not?
Right. Nikala, great interview. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here.
Break!